to Louis Cypher Productions interview and conversation with Dave Jeffery, the author and screenwriter and gent and legend. Mr. Jeffery, how are you tonight?
Well, I'm kind of reeling from the term legend. I don't know. I don't know whether I'm a legend or not, but I am a writer. so at least I meet one of those definitions. So it's very nice of you to say, though, Louis, in all fairness. And thanks very much for having me on. You know, I really appreciate the support, you know, you guys have given us over the past 3 years, easily 3 years, isn't it? So, yeah, just thank you very much for all the support.
My pleasure, absolute pleasure. Like you mentioned there, I've been a fan of your work since Ascension. But just in terms, most people that might not know of you, where do you live? Where do you work? Just a little bit of an introduction of who you are and what you do, if you don't mind.
No, sure. I live in the UK in a place called Bromsgrove, which is about 9 miles outside Birmingham, in a county called Worcestershire. I actually work in Birmingham. My full-time job is a mental health care professional, and my my sort of secret life, or certainly not so secret life anymore, is a writer of adventure, mysteries, fiction, and also horror as well. And that's for a variety of markets, and that can be from young adults to the adult market. So that's me. That's what I do. That's who I am.
Excellent, thank you. Now, currently, you are working with 2 different publishing houses, Severed Press, as well as Crystal Lake Publishing.
Yes.
Can you just quickly explain to us how do these relationships come about, and how do they benefit your current success and your future workload?
In terms of, I guess, in terms of Crystal Lake, that goes back to, I guess, the days of Ascension, which is our short zombie film that we made with VLM Productions. And Joe Maynard, who's the CEO of Crystal Lake, got in touch with us because he'd sort of knew of us from Facebook and online and different platforms online, and wanted to know basically about our experiences in making a short yet successful film on a very, very low budget. Excuse me. And he's putting together a book called Silver Screen Horror 201 with Crystal Lake Publishing. And in that, there was a variety of different perspectives and I guess experiences from a wide range of horror writers and screenwriters and movie directors. So a wide variety of genre creatives got together, and these range from the likes of the late great Wes Craven to John Carpenter to George Romero. Tom Holland, so a wide variety of sort of genre, highly respected professionals, and then at the other end of the spectrum, you've got me and James Hart. But what Joe was interested in was basically how people with very limited experience were able to put a film together, and we did an essay about our experiences of doing that in order to try and encourage and motivate other people to do it, you know, and proving it could be done on a really low budget and with a degree of drive and passion. Ultimately, you know, reap dividends, because we got quite a few awards for that film as a first project, so it was successful in its own limited way. So from I first met Joe and got involved with Crystal Lake, and then I sent Joe a couple of other things. I wanted to try and do some written work with him, and sent him a couple of briefs. One was a Yeti adventure story called Frostbite, which didn't really meet the brief for Crystal Lake, and the other one was Beatrice Beecham's Cryptic Crypt, which fortunately Crystal Lake took on. Joe really enjoyed the premise of it and enjoyed what I sent him, and that was released through Crystal Lake on March the 3rd of this year. So I guess linking into what happened with Severed Press, the other story I'd already published with Severed Press, they took on my Necropolis Rising series, zombie series. I published 3 books with them, and in this series, and the most recent one, Dead Empire, came out in February. So I was really looking to work with them again because they're very, very good in terms of their genre. They're very much zompoc and post-apocalyptic stuff and cryptozoology, all that kind of really, real adventure yarns, which I really enjoy writing. But Frostbite really sat within that again because it's an adventure yarn with yetis and lots of action and stuff like that. And so I sent them the synopsis for Frostbite, and they fortunately took that on. So that's a series. They took that on for a series of books, so that can go on for as little or as long as we agree on, I guess. But I've certainly got stories for at least 5. They may not be sequential, they might not be in the same kind of universe, but they will all be Yeti based. But I said that with the Necropolis Rising, I said that it wouldn't all be set in the same universe, and I'm still finding stories to tell in that universe. So watch this space on Frostbite. So yeah. So and in terms of how prospectively how that's going to work, I've got the Frostbite series with Severed Press, and I'm also doing a sequel to Beatrice Beecham's Cryptic Crypt, which is called Ship of Shadows for Crystal Lake, which is due out in September of this year. So that's where we're at with that.
Excellent. Sounds very exciting. Now, you mentioned James Hart, you mentioned Ascension. So not only are you an author, you're also a filmmaker. But take me back when all of this started. In a previous interview, you mentioned that you were doing animation, you were drawing comics. So can you just give us a little bit of info on how that happened, how that artistry started? And then second to that, perhaps just if you can work on any property today, that be?
The comic books were things that I did when I was in my youth, really, early teens. Me and a guy named Lee Mercer, when we were in secondary school, which I guess would be high school in the States, for any of our American friends who might be watching this. So in high school, basically, and what we did, me and Lee, we took my passion in my youth was Planet of the Apes. It was like the traditional Planet of the Apes movies and TV shows around that time. And I was a real fanatic on it, and I still am a massive Planet of the Apes fan. And so I did like sort of all the drawings for Planet of the Apes stories, and he was a mad Star Trek fan, and that was the original Star Trek, the William Shatner and Leonard Nimoy sort of series, the original. And he used to do the Star Trek one, so we used to do a Planet of the Apes and a Star Trek comic books. Lee was an incredible artist, and I was okay. I certainly wasn't of a caliber. And more as the time went on, I got more and more into actually writing the stories, and I got more out of enjoying the stories. But what in our time we used to. This was back in the days of carbon copy paper. There was no sort of all digital stuff. It was all carbon copy. So we made about 10 copies, really pressing down on all the images and interlaid with carbon copy to make 10 copies, and we used to sell them for a couple of pence. and then we used to spend the money in the truck shop. So, God, this is a real nostalgia trip for me. It's like going back in time. It's looked beautiful. But yeah, that's what we did. And then over time, I got more and more interested in, I guess, developing stories. And by the time I was left school, I was really into writing. I'd written a couple of novels. I mean, they were pretty poor. I mean, some people might say what I'm writing now is poor, but they were pretty poor back then. And they're still in the loft. I've got both of them in the loft. One was called Badlands, and the other one which was like some Dune rip-off, sort of Frank Herbert Dune rip-off. And the other one was called The Box, which was like a really creepy alien thing living in this box that was found in a quarry, and that's purely based on I guess my love of pulp fiction, like the Guy N. Smith and James Herbert type stuff, really. In terms of franchises, who would I like to write for? To write something for Judge Dredd. He was like sort of my real hero when I was younger. I used to love 2000 AD. I used to love all those original stories, and John Wagner. If you're watching this, John, it's highly unlikely, but we live in hope. But if you can find a little bit of space and you need to write a Judge Dredd story, that would be amazing. Thank you. Creep, 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 creep. But in terms of that, I really would love to. I really would love to write something in the Judge Dredd universe. I think I'd like it about as much as I would like Netflix to make a TV series of the new Dredd movies. That would be amazing.
Well, let's see if we can make it happen.
Oh, we found that.
Another question. Obviously, as an artist, but mainly as an author, what parts of the process do you find exhausting, and which parts of the process do you find energizing?
Exhausting. I mean, I don't know whether other writers get this. I mean, I guess some do, because I have discussions on Facebook about it. But you get pretty exhausted once a book is finished. It's like once it's finished, you get. I personally get this sense of. It feels like a sense of grieving. I mean, it sounds a little bit odd to say that, but you do, because you've committed a lot of time and a lot of emotional into creating something, and then when it's ultimately finished, you kind of grieve for it in a way, because of that investment, I guess, that emotional investment. So yeah, I do find that quite exhausting. I do, in terms of that process, and yet by the same token, just bear with me a second. I've got to charge my. There we go. There we are. Just charging my phone up again. So in terms of this, I think I've disappeared off the screen again. By the looks.
It's fine. We can hear you clearly.
Oh, that's fine then. I think in terms of this, I think you also get energized by the fact that you finished the book, and then there's also the next project to move on to, and starting a new project. Like at the moment, I've started Ship of Shadows, and suddenly it's amazing. I mean, really energized into getting back into that story and back into that Beatrice Beecham universe. So yeah. So those are the two things that I find really. I guess those are the two things where it gives an idea of what drains you and what energizes you, I guess. I've got a real feeling, Louis, at this point, my phone's going to die again. It's really starting to get hot. So we might need to sort of stop for a little bit and then reconnect, if I can do that. But I'll carry on with this as much as I can until it goes.
Okay.
Is that right?
Let's do one more question and we can take a break.
Okay.
If you can go back into time and advise your younger self anything, something personally or writing related, what would that advice be?
I would say never give up. Don't ever give up, because even if you keep sending stuff out and getting rejections, you're always learning. You're always learning your craft. So keep doing it and take the advice you get from people who normally really good editors and I guess publishers will send back critiques of what they're looking for and where you can improve and don't take that personally. Take that as a way of learning your craft. It's like I guess it's a little bit like an apprenticeship to some degree. You're going to write stuff, it's going to suck. That's the reality, and people are there to tell you. And I think you need people to tell you that it sucks if it does. Also get a really good editor. Get involved in the editorial process early on, so that you can get used to people picking your work apart. I've worked with some great editors and some people who are quite forthright in terms of this is no good, this doesn't work, and you do need that in order to ultimately come out with a something of meaning and something of quality at the end of it. You really need that. And I guess I would always suggest that just don't ever give up. And if you're going to be a writer, you cannot be a writer unless you read. You have to read. You have to read widely as well. I would suggest that you read, a lot of the classics. Read broadly. Don't just read genre fiction, because it ultimately limits you as a writer. And I think my personal view is that if you only limit yourself to genre, you can't, and you want to write genre fiction. If you want to move ahead of the pack, if you want to sort of stand out in a absolute ocean full of people who are putting stuff out there all the time, then it's the quality of the writing that has to come through. But by the same token, I would also say don't sacrifice the quality of the writing. I guess maybe not so much the quality of the writing, but don't sacrifice the story against the quality of the writing, if you see what I mean. Because sometimes you can have beautiful prose that goes on for 350 pages, but ultimately the story's thin, it's boring, it's bland, but you've written 350 pages of beautiful prose that probably won't ever sell. Your peers will love it. Your peers will say, that's amazing, that's really good, and it'll soon give you that sense of feedback that what you're doing in terms of your craft is good, but will it sell to your average Joe on the street who's looking for a bit of entertainment? And I'm not afraid of saying that I write to entertain people. I like to entertain people, and if people think that it's written well, that's great, but fundamentally I want people to come away to say, yeah, I really enjoyed that, or I thought that was awful. I want them to have one extreme or the other. I don't care, as long as they have some feeling attached to it. But I mean, I don't know about you, if you've ever been to see a movie that cost 350 million pounds to make, and you come out and went, oh, it was all right. It was all right, I mean, there can't be anything more soul destroying for a filmmaker, I don't think. Or any.
It has to elicit either an amazing positive or negative effect, and that we can discuss and people can engage in the conversation. But if it's middle of the road, us.
Yeah, indeed, yeah. But this is something that we always wanted to do with Ascension. When we made Ascension, was about having emotional resonance and emotional connect with people. It was about making a story that people felt connected to on an emotional level rather than a visceral level, because people remember the emotion rather than the gore.
That's true, and Ascension definitely did that. Dave, I think we'll take a bit of a break here.
Okay.
See how you get on with your phone. You on the flip side.
Okay. See you in a bit.
So